understandably, we had to cut a lot of things during those lean years, and education was among them. Other states, since the recession, have restored their education funding. Kansas did not.
No.
And when you factor in inflation, we have not kept up with the costs of educating our students. And also the block grant bill holds our funding flat from for this year that's ending and for next year as well. And it doesn't account for increases in operating costs. KCP&L has increased their power rates. That's going to cost Shawnee Mission an additional $750,000 a year. Health insurance costs, paper costs, food costs, all that is going up. So that means school districts have fewer funds to operate with under the block grant bill.
Will you vote to extend the ban on guns on campus?
I will not. And the reason I think that question should probably be phrased, would you vote to ban law-abiding citizens from having guns on campus? Because there are already guns on campuses. We want to make sure that the right people have the ability to protect themselves. So I would not support that.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
How do you
I
define the right
absolutely
people?
would vote to extend the ban on guns on campus. Become a permanent ban. I don't know of anybody who, at least no one has contacted me saying they're in favor of that. Students, parents of students, which I am. One of my daughters is back in school at K-State now. And she and her friends are absolutely against this. I fear we will lose good faculty members from our institutions of higher learning. It will put a chill on their ability to teach. It'll put a chill on robust discussion of issues in a classroom if they know that students out there are carrying guns. It's just not a good policy at all.
If I might, I actually serve on the committee Fed and State where this was dealt with. This has been the law in Colorado since I believe 2008, and Colorado has not had an incident on their campus. And unfortunately, the state of Colorado has experience with gun massacres in gun-free zones. They know all too well what happens in a gun-free zone. And the state of Colorado has allowed guns on campus for some time now, and as a result, they have not had an incident.
I'll add one more thing. My daughter is studying criminal justice, basically. She wants to be a police officer someday, and she can't use a gun in her courses, in her in her group that they have a group of a college group that supports law enforcement, and they can't do anything with guns on campus because, and that's part of what they're studying. They should be able to use guns. So,
Go to a
you know,
fire.
there's unintended consequences of these bans that need to be looked at as well. So, I'm in favor of having the gun bans go off campus.
A vote to extend the ban does absolutely nothing. If anybody in this room seriously believes that a sticker on a door is keeping guns out of college campuses, you're mistaken. And if you think that there aren't guns in the classroom right now, you're mistaken. And if you think that there's anything preventing a person from getting upset at an instructor and using that gun in a harmful manner, you're mistaken, other than the fact that it's not happening here in Kansas. And it's not going to happen here in Kansas. Law-abiding citizens that carry weapons have been trained how to use them. They are not going to pull them out in the classroom and threaten teachers because they don't like the grade or they don't like the topic that's being discussed.
Excuse me. If there are guns on campus now, it's against the law and we have the obligation to report it. So if they become apparent, then we can call the police and we can report the gun. In the future, if guns are allowed on college campuses, I, as a staff employee at Johnson County Community College, do not know if that gun is okay or not. I mean, they're all okay. So how do I know who the good guy and the bad guy is? Now we can't alert the police.
How many students have you caught carrying guns in your classroom?
0, but you just told me that they're there.
They are, but apparently you're not recognizing.
But if it became apparent, we can call the police. In the future, if a gun becomes apparent, we have no ability to call the police because it's legal.
Ma'am, what's
You've
going to
been
make
a
it
teacher.
apparent if they can carry the gun?
You've been a
What would
teacher,
make
how
it
many
apparent?
guns have you seen in your classroom?
Them pulling it out.
Pardon me?
Them revealing it, seeing it.
It would be concealed, just like it is now.
I think you can see when there's a gun concealed.
Next question. How do you plan to fix our crippling revenue shortfall that caused a downgrade in our bond rating and forced unsustainable measures with the pension delay and highway sweep?
I'll start with the highway sweeps. It's time that we had highway projects come through the legislature like it's done in most states. The setting of money going straight to the highway department and not being vetted through the legislature for big projects, it's a bad way to do it. The money should actually start in the general fund and then go to the highway department, not the other way around. We've had excess money in the highway department partly because asphalt prices have dropped a lot in the last few years. So I know they're talking about certain delayed projects, but everything on the boards currently is still getting done. So the fear that the contractors want steady money because that's their revenue stream. I think those projects need to be approved in the legislature.
Well, the first part of the question is, what would you do to increase revenue? It's been obvious to me and to many other people out there that the income tax cuts of 2012 and 2013 have got to be rolled back. And let's just mean the business pass-through taxes. That was 29%. The business taxes was 29% of the income tax cuts that we've had so far. The other 71% was the individual income tax rate changes. They got rid of the top rate, which benefited the wealthiest taxpayers, and they lowered the other 2 rates. So that has been the bulk of the cause of our revenue shortfall. And it goes back to the 3-legged stool of property tax, sales tax, and income tax. That third leg of the stool has been cut off, and our revenue system is extremely unstable now. And it's showing up even more now because some of the other sectors are hurting as well. Our sales tax revenues are not as what they thought they would be, despite the increase in sales tax last year to 6.5% from 6.15%. More people are shopping online, and so we aren't getting sales tax from that. And I think many Kansans, especially here in Johnson County, are shopping out of state, going across the state line. So we can't count on sales tax as much. Property tax values, when there are things such as the oil and gas recession, the pressures on that industry, putting pressure on property values, then our property tax rates are not as stable. So we need 3 stable legs of that stool, and we've got to roll back those income taxes. And one of the reasons I voted against the business tax bill, aside from the fact that it was done hastily and wasn't well thought out, was because it wasn't the comprehensive revenue fix that we need. We need real revenue reform to get us out of this deep hole that we're in and that's getting deeper. As to the highway cuts, it's just a travesty what's been done to the T-Works program. In essence, the T-Works program essentially no longer exists. This year, with the cuts this year alone, $550 million in highway projects that were on the drawing board have been delayed or done away with completely. Most of those are in rural Kansas, not in the higher density areas like we are here. But they need good roads out there as well. Also, cuts to the highway program mean cuts in jobs. Many contractors and their suppliers have had to lay off people or send them out of state to work in Oklahoma, Texas. You know, those are dollars that could be spent here in Kansas, in local communities. And, you know, yes, we have great highways in Kansas, but they won't be great for long if we keep robbing the highway system.
Kansas recently had the worst job loss since 2014. Why do you still support Brownback's tax plan? Worst job loss.
0%.
Apparently someone has information that we don't have up here. We do not have a job loss in Kansas.
0% growth.
We have a 2.9% unemployment rate in Johnson County, 3.9% in the entire state.
0% growth.
We are not in a problem with jobs. We have more jobs now than we do people.
No job growth.
No job growth.
I
If you don't have
agree.
the
We
people to fill the
0%
jobs, it's not
growth.
gonna grow.
But the latest jobs report indicated 0% growth.
Yes.
From a year ago.
And the plan was supposed to.
Which is not a loss.
And 9 of 11 states that have the same unemployment or less than us,
Very few states have the same.
9 out of the 11 have increased their employment, have higher rates of increases, up to 4.4% in Idaho.
And the
So
source,
don't tell me that
and
there's
the
not a
source for that is
possibility.
what, sir?
The argument doesn't hold any water.
What's the source?
Huh?
What's your source?
The Bureau of Labor Statistics.
Bureau of Labor Statistics?
Yes,
Yes.
that just came out.
Same question. This was not widely publicized, which is obvious because of the small crowd. How do you publicize these? They're put out on Facebook, they're put out by newsletter, and apparently you all knew about it because you're here. Will you promise to refrain from all deceptive ads on school funding and the economy and jobs? Whose question is this? What does that mean?
There are claims that are being made. I've been receiving mailers at home that don't take into account what was done with the special education funding that used to go directly to the providers of special education funding, that now go to the schools before it goes to those providers, and they're claiming that as an increase in education funding when it isn't. The same thing with capers, and then of course there's one other one. I can't think of it right now. There are three the property taxes used to are being redirected to, and all of these are being claimed now as increases in funding when they aren't. All they are is just a redirection of funding that already existed. That is really dishonest, highly misleading, and I don't want to receive any more mailers that don't explain those things to us. We need to have the truth. We need to have the facts so we can vote the right way.
Bottom line, sir, is that the money has increased, period, from all sources. It has increased.
It hasn't. It hasn't. And we
Kansas
know
Department
what the
of
facts
Education
are.
website, go look. It's there.
I've seen the facts.
If you look at the numbers that the Kansas Department of Education provides, you'll see that the local versus state changed, but the overall still increased. It's increased every year since 2009. The amount of per student, the amount total has increased every year.
Can I clarify for the gentleman that had the former question, the Kansas Labor Market Report and Kansas Department of Labor, that the preliminary seasonally adjusted figures for April 2016, Kansas has lost 3,700 non-farm jobs. The private sector jobs, let's see, decreased by 3,000.
That's a job loss. That's a job loss.
As a business owner and LLC, I support closing the loophole. Would you discuss why you supported this issue? Myself, Senator King, and Senator Denning proposed the bill, Senate Bill 508, which would have closed the LLC quote-unquote loophole. The tax cut in 2012 never intended for 100% of that business's monies to not be taxed. They simply allowed business income that was used to grow the business, to reinvest in the business, infrastructure, hiring new employees, those types of things, to be not taxed so that they could use that money for those purposes. Wages were never intended not to be taxed. You go back and you look at the original tax bill, it's very clear in there. Wages were not intended to not be taxed. No testimony was offered in any committee, and it's all online and you can look at it, that they had thought that all of the money would go through and not be taxed. That alone would be enough to close the budget deficit that we've been talking about, the money there from the LLC, period. It would still allow for job growth, still allow for, to incentivize the economy. Now, there are some people up here that have said we need to roll the whole thing back. Basically what they're telling you is they're gonna raise your taxes by 30%, your taxes by 30%. I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna raise your taxes by 30%, your income tax. No way.
Minus sales tax.
But this is a matter of, and I've had business owners tell me, like the person that did this card, it's hard for them to look their employees in the face who do a similar job to what the owner of the business does. And that employee has to pay income tax on those wages, but that business owner does not. It's difficult to do that, and so they're asking for that LLC loophole to be closed. That was the purpose behind that. The reason for the LLC loophole came through manipulation of the tax code, certain ways that that income can be reported, puts it in different lines on your income tax form, and it allows it all to pass through. It was never the intent of the legislature for that to be. That's why I support that.
I voted against, as I said earlier, I voted against Senate Bill 63 to reinstate the business taxes. I absolutely believe we need to reinstate income taxes on businesses. But this bill, I disagree with Senator Smith. This bill wouldn't have even gotten us back to zero on, not even the break even on our shortfall this coming fiscal year and the current fiscal year. It wouldn't have taken effect officially until January 1, 2017, but that means we wouldn't see the revenue from it until April 2018. Would have done nothing with our $290 million deficit that we had to deal with this budget fix we just did. Again, we need comprehensive revenue reform, not just piecemeal. Another reason I voted against that was it would have made it that much harder to do the real revenue fix that has to happen next year, the comprehensive one. Because if we raised, had our largest tax increase ever last year, $400 million increase with the sales tax increase, the cigarette tax increase, and other things. If we passed the business tax increase this year, then it would have made it that much harder to do the rest of the comprehensive rollback of the 2012 income taxes next year, which is what we have to get us back on our feet financially. And that was a tax cut in 2012 that people really weren't asking for. Businesses weren't asking for that, and individuals weren't asking to have their individual rates cut. The average Kansan wants their money to go to pay for essential services that only the state can provide. Good highways, good schools, public safety, prisons, guards, KDOT, Kansas Highway Patrol officers, essential services need to be funded, and we need more revenue to do that. Yes, we have a revenue problem.
You said our taxes would go up 30%. In 2012, when that rollback happened, I went to my accountant to get my taxes figured, and he, the staunch Republican that he was, said, "Aren't you glad you got this tax break?" And I said, "I don't know. I saved $60. That's not 30%. I don't understand. 30% is a lot of money. How does that, if my rollback was only $60 that I got back, how are my taxes going up 30% if we reinstate it. That doesn't jive.
Every taxpayer in Kansas, the effect of the tax cut was a 30% reduction in income
You
tax.
didn't cut my taxes by 30%.
Can't possibly be expected.
You'll have to ask your tax person, I'm not a tax
No, I'm
person.
just saying, you
Talking
didn't
about
cut.
the broad numbers, 1% to another percent. Your taxes get with 1,000 tax.
Yeah, well, I didn't.
Yeah, we're talking about him, he's the elected
I have
official.
never heard
He's the one who pay.
Silly question, I'm offended by that.
Yeah.
Extremely.
Your taxes are your taxes.
No, I'm
You know the
extremely offended by
particularities
you
of
telling me
your.
I asked a
Hey,
silly
folks,
question.
can we get back to the questions that we have up here, please?
Okay, I'd like to go back to bigger picture on the LLC, so-called tax loophole. So I know one of our goals in this state is to move away from taxing people's productivity. States with low taxes or no taxes have a growth rate. And so we have some folks, Art Laffer, who was served under Reagan, as economic policy, Stephen Moore. These guys are guys that have seen what's going on in other states. They have a bit more of a global perspective than some of us here at the state level. And it's not debatable that states with low to no income tax have more positive job growth. Small businesses are the backbone of our state. Any small business owner, they're paying double on Social Security. They pay the employer and employee portion of Social Security. They take risk. If they have a commercial property, their income or their property tax on that commercial property is higher than a residential property. They take all kinds of risks. And so, again, I look at the bigger picture. We put out a big billboard that says we're open for business. We have businesses move here, and then we're going to change the direction we're moving. That's bad policy, and it's bad politics. So I'm all for the business tax cuts. I was not here when the law was put in place. I spoke with my predecessor who was, and what we're calling the loophole was one of its major features and benefits. And so I'm a strong proponent of that, and I believe I actually have a chiropractor who is able to start growing his business because of this tax cut. And some of you look at that and you think, well, it's not much, and it seems somewhat irrelevant. Why don't they kick it in? But some businesses are struggling. Some businesses, this is a great benefit for. And my question, and it's interesting, I work helping people grow and protect their investments. I also have a number of CPAs I know. And so I don't hear the screaming of business owners to say they want to kick in their fair share. I actually know some that have taken what they would have paid and they've either put that money in equipment or given raises to their employees. So to the business owners out there that would say, this isn't fair, I'd say, well, you know, if you're bothered so much by that, take what you would have saved and how about providing a better benefit for your employees or turn around and give it to them. But those few out there that I hear are bothered by that, and by the way, I haven't met one yet, but if there is someone like that, I'd say, well, you know, if it bothers you so much, pay your employees more. Bless your employees. Why does it only bother you when it's dealing with the state? Walk your talk. Give your employees a raise with that money. That's a good way to better Kansas.
Can we hear from the other two representatives on their opinion on the tax cuts?
And one other reason on the pass-through for small businesses, they don't get the same breaks that big businesses do. They don't get TIFs, they don't get benefit districts, they don't get the incentives that big businesses do. So if mom and pop hardware store gets some money back in their taxes, that way, that's only fair because the big box store down the street's getting a benefit on their property taxes. So I think it's simply a fairness issue for small businesses to compete with big businesses.
I, like Representative Powell, have heard on the doorstep firsthand occurrences where this has benefited small business owners, where they have hired new people because of this very tax plan. And I don't think that I can put it any better than Representative Powell, that we have created a policy in the state of Kansas to attract business. Those businesses that are moving to the state of Kansas have that expectation, and we should not yank the rug out from under them when they have been given that expectation.
What does the legislature plan to do about the directive from the federal government on use of bathroom, shower, locker room facilities by transgenders, and how soon might Kansas have a bill like HB 2 in North Carolina?
We actually have a bill that hasn't made it above the line. I would love to see us still vote on this, our final day in session, that would protect, how many of you have a daughter? So.
I have a son too.
A son too, okay, all right, yeah. So, okay, but I think that the primary issue here is a concern for our girls and our ladies, and so to protect their privacy, there are other ways that you can show deference to someone. There is a bathroom privacy bill that is that would not allow. Well, I'll say this, parents have a reasonable expectation that public schools in this state will not allow their minor children to be viewed in various states of undress by members of the opposite sex, nor allow their minor children to view members of the opposite sex in various states of undress. Guys, this is just common sense.
Swimming pools?
Yeah, swimming pools.
Pardon me?
Are you including like a swimming pool outfit, or what is a various state of undress?
I'm saying locker rooms and bathrooms. So I think the privacy of our girls and boys should be honored. And so the National Association of Pediatrics, with regard to the transgender dilemma that has just all of a sudden mushroomed, all of a sudden that this state, that this country has such an issue with the way it's being addressed. Even our National Association of Pediatricians, or that may not be the proper name for the organization, but they're saying that the way we're attempting to address it by enabling folks to go, children to go down this path, is damaging to our children. So that's not me saying
Psychology is
Maybe
what?
you'd like to
May I clarify as a physician, I'm sorry, there are two groups of pediatricians that identify themselves as national organizations. And one is a very centralized around social issues, and the other represents the healthcare community. And you are speaking about the group that focuses on social issues in pediatrics. So just to be clear, there is more than one group. So the American Academy of Pediatricians has a different stand.
Thank you for clarifying.
And I would say one that what I'm referring to, I believe, in my estimation, takes a holistic look at children that are not compartmentalized. You have physical, emotional, psychological, and spiritual implications.
Give me a break.
To use Senator Smith's example, with guns, it's not new. Transgendered women as men aren't new. This has been happening. They've been peeing, in peas for decades now. Why now?
Yeah.
That's my question. Why has it become such a major issue for something that it impact you? You're wanting to tell.
Because you're putting the bill out there.
It wasn't an issue until you brought up legislation.
Right. Now it's an issue.
It wasn't an issue until they tried
Focus on the budget and
to put
talk,
it into.
and forget.
Hey, folks, if everybody talks, you're not going to hear us, and we're not going to hear you.
We don't care here
A bill like, I don't know what, there was a bill introduced in the Kansas House, one in the Kansas Senate. I'm not sure what the provisions were, if they were just like North Carolina's bill, but they went nowhere, and I'm glad they went nowhere. To me, we need to focus on education and jobs and the real issues in front of Kansas.
The underlying concern with this whole thing is the overreach by the federal government again. The president does not have the constitutional authority to withhold funding from public education. and cannot tell public schools what they can or cannot do when it comes to this policy and threaten to withhold that money. There's the crime that we have right there.
That's exactly
You need to
what
be going to
happened
your
when
local
they physically
school
blocked
boards
Ole
and
Miss and said
hold them
segregation
accountable
now,
there.
segregation forever. It's
Why
not
is
any
everyone
different.
respectful when Mrs. Gallagher is speaking and no one can be
Because
respectful
she's
when
telling
the
the
other
truth
board?
and he's saying
Why
something
don't
that's
you
not
shut
true.
up?
The federal government has and got involved before.
Can we listen to the questions that have been submitted, please?
Be respectful.
It's the same as segregation.
Okay.
The federal government got involved before.
This has pretty much been addressed before, but when is the state budget going to be addressed in a comprehensive manner? Why is the legislature concerned with the court usurping legislative power, yet continue themselves to usurp local government authority by property tax lids and local school boards? And Senator Smith, what specific NEA activities harm students? All of those have been addressed.
Except for the property, if I could, on the property
Yeah.
tax lid. The property tax lid was finally replaced last year, and this year we moved it up from January 1 of 18 to January 1 of 17. So this has been a concern that I've heard time and time again from constituents. They don't like the rapid increase in property taxes that the local governments have put on. And so it was, and they still have that ability, but it's even more local control now. They have to take it to the vote of their citizens. So the citizens still can raise the property tax rates above the rate of inflation if they want for projects that the county or the cities feel they need. But we haven't taken anything from the city level and put it at the state. We take it from the city level and put it at the people. So we've made it more local control, not less.
I disagree with that. I'm all about local control, and the property tax lid ties the hands of local governments, whether it's a city, a county, or a school district. The bill that we passed this year in the veto session was about as good as we were going to get, so I voted for it. It included, there was a lot of compromise that went in on it, and included a number of exemptions in which local governments don't have to go to, put to a vote of the people to raise property taxes in certain situations. But still, overall, the property tax lid ties the hands of local government, and the timing of having to have those elections doesn't jive well at all with the budgetary timeline for local governments. So it's a problem.
I will add on that was the law in Kansas prior to 1999, that any property tax increase did have to go to the voters. So really we're returning to a previous state of law in which the local citizen had more control and more say on property taxes.
Guns are a huge factor in suicide. How can you purport to support suicide prevention in the schools when you support guns everywhere? This was addressed to me personally. There's a lot of things that are a huge factor in suicide. Drug overdose is huge, yet we don't take those away and hide them away. More people are killed by cars every day than anything else in the United States, but we're not outlawing cars. Gun owners, responsible gun owners, have a Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. It cannot be taken away from them. We have to rely on them to be responsible, just like we have to rely on people to be responsible with anything else that can be misused. You can kill somebody with a hammer. You can kill somebody with a steak knife. You have to be responsible with the things that are in front of you. And the Jason Flatt Act is one of those responses, is to make sure that kids that may be feeling that way are recognized before they can take that kind of action.
A gun is not the cause of a suicide. It can be the instrument to that means, but that is not what gets the person into a suicidal state. And I believe that that's the core issue that needs to be addressed.
This one pretty much has been addressed, but we'll bring it up again. Why was pass-through unintended? Was this a failure of the legislature to research consequences? As I said, 2012, it wasn't unintended, it was very intended that non-wage income would not be taxed, but that all the other income would be taxed. There was a interpretation by the Department of Revenue of that statute and an interpretation by CPAs in the state of Kansas that filed these tax returns that said, you know what, if we restructure this, I can get everything to pass through for you. And people took advantage of that. It's a loophole that they found. I'm not going to begrudge people that found it. Nobody likes to pay taxes. On the other hand, the goal of the legislature was to grow business, was to grow the economy. If you have a small business, there was an article that KCUR had just the other day. Bill Self has an LLC. It's $2.3 million that comes into that LLC, and most of it passes through. All right, that was not the intent of the legislature. Now, to be totally fair, Bill Self had the LLC long before that law was ever passed. So to point Bill Self out, as they did in the news, I think is unfair. But bottom line is, it was meant for businesses that were going to reinvest in their business, improve the business, hire more employees. That was the intent of it. There was no unintended consequence other than the fact that I guess we didn't think far enough ahead to figure out that some accountants would be able to get around it.
Whether that was loophole or not, whether there were unintended consequences or not, I'm not sure. I wasn't in the legislature in 2012, but it's obvious that it has not grown our economy. It has not brought jobs to Kansas. And the policy, the experiment, there's a lot of people in Topeka who bought into that experiment and have stuck with that policy through the years, and now they're trying. Some of them are trying to backpedal away from it. I've been speaking out against that consistently.
How are we doing before the tax policy?
Excuse me?
How are we doing before the tax policy in terms of private sector?
We were coming out of the recession and starting to grow our economy, and then this was a tax cut that people weren't asking for, and we can see what it's done to our state's finances. Regarding unintended consequences, in the veto session, when we passed bills in the wee hours in the morning, and things are hastily thrown together in a conference committee of 6 people, and conference committee reports are coming at us fast and furious with bundled bills, several bills together in one. That's how we get our unintended consequences. That's how we get bad policy passed. In the middle of the night when people aren't awake to listen. That happens all the time, and it's just part of the backroom deal graphic I passed out. It's the way things are, the way the process is handled in the Kansas legislature is bad, and it's getting worse every year.
I disagree with that. Representative Gallagher is a freshman and has very little experience with how the legislature works. It's true.
Disrespectful.
Bundling bills is common practice. All the bills that go into a conference committee report that have been bundled, they've been heard before. These are not new topics that all of a sudden appeared at 1 o'clock in the morning. And to infer that that's the way it happens is being disingenuous with you.
It is not.
They are bills that have been heard by everyone. It is up to each representative and each senator to do their due diligence and research every single bill that comes before them. And if they don't, that's on them. That's not on the process. That's because they didn't do their job.
Research, then how did you end up with this unintended consequence?
Exactly.
There is not a law that hasn't been passed that didn't have an unintended consequence, ma'am. And it doesn't matter if it was in a bundled bill or if it came through the process 100% and took 90 days to get there. It still had an unintended consequence.
When bills are bundled like that, changes get made in conference committee. And we get a conference committee report on our desk, at best, 30 minutes before we have to vote on it. And it's got 4 or 5 bills together in one. And, we don't have time to wade through and refresh our memory on what are the issues there and to find what the changes are that have been made in the conference committee. I had a stack, I took a picture on my desk of a stack of conference committee reports, and it was this thick of what we did in 5 days during the veto session. And I've heard that we passed more bills during those 5 days than we did during the entire regular session. And a lot of that was just done in haste without enough time to properly debate, properly vet. some of those issues, and some of the changes that were made.
Actually, we're given a tool called Can Focus, whereas bills are worked on the floor, we're able to, with regard to specific bills, put in notes where we stood on the bill, why we stood on the bill, any other thing we find relevant. So at our fingertips, if we're diligent and keeping track of bills passed, we're able to access at our fingertips information on bills. Certainly the information we're given in veto session from conference committee reports, there are a lot of pages because they have the original bills, but if you kind of go past all that, it goes immediately to what those changes are. So actually, if you're paying attention in session, and if you're doing your job, taking notes, tracking these things on a tool we've been provided called Can Focus, then you can stay on top of things.
I have a follow-up question on your point about the bill.
Yep, it was gotta be the last one that we're supposed to be out of here.
I'd like the three representatives then to speak to the issue of Simon's Law.
Speak to the issue of what?
There was a conferenceable bill that was in the final set of the legislature, and if they've had the opportunity as a representative to read the bill and study it before it was voted on in the final session, it was voted on in the Senate, it was conferenceable in the House. I'd like the three representatives to speak to the merits of the Simon.
There's 4 representatives with 4, excuse me.
Can you refresh us on what the Simon bill was?
I just heard that you should be able to know what that is if you have your homework.
If we have it at our fingertips.
Yeah.
To reference the title of a bill and not.
It's about DNRs for babies.
That bill did not come before the House.
That's true. That is true. And it would not have come before the House had Jan Paul sent it forward. She did not. Chair of the committee. That would not have been heard in the House by anybody else other than the conference. Senator.
It has to pass one chamber or it can't go to conference.
You said they have the opportunity to review it before it's voted on.
They do.
The
Every
House does
single
not.
bill. Every single
At
bill.
1 o'clock in the morning.
No, it's been there for months. 4 months.
It didn't go to the House.
The bill is online. Anybody can look at it. You can look at it.
So how are they going to vote?
I would assume they'd read the bill.
At 1 o'clock in the morning.
They could have read it
I
months
looked at that
before.
bill. Now that you remind me what it was, I would have voted for it.
Thank you all for coming. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
I've got a sign-up sheet out there on the table if you'd like to sign up for my newsletter. And I have my